The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. But my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
That ought
ghost
to do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. How's everybody doing tonight?
Tonight's episode is going to be on the Dogman. Now, we did a episode on the Dogman before. We didn't really get into a lot of details like we do on a normal show. We had a guest. We had Chris Edge on, and we talked about the Dogman. On this episode, it's going to be primarily focused on some different eyewitness accounts of the Dogman. We're going to do a little bit of the history, and we're going to do a little bit of speculating on what we think it might be. But mostly, this show is going to be different eyewitness reports, and then you guys can make up your own mind on it. Now, the Dogman is a cryptozoological creature that was first reported in 1887. In Wexford County, Michigan. Now, the Dogman is somewhere around 7 foot tall. It's got blue or amber eyes. It's bipedal, and it is a canine-like animal with the torso of a man and a fearsome howl that supposedly sounds like a human scream. Now, if you had to picture this thing in your mind, picture a werewolf. That's basically what this thing's going to look like a very, very large werewolf. Now, according to the legends, the Dogman appears in a 10-year cycle. The 10 years is always up on a year ending in 7. And the sightings have been reported all across Michigan, but it's primarily in the northwestern area of the Lower Peninsula. In 1987, there was a song that a disc jockey named Steve Cook made about the legend of the Dogman. That's when this thing really blew up and got super popular. But there's been sightings of this thing going all the way back, like I said, into the 1800s. The first encounter with the Dogman was in 1887 in Wexford County, and 2 lumberjacks saw a creature that they described as having a man's body and a dog's head. In 1937 in Paris, Michigan, a guy named Robert Fortney was attacked by 5 wild dogs, and he said that one of those dogs walked on 2 legs. There's also been reports of the creature from Allegan County in the 50s and in Manistee and Cross Village in 1967. Now, like I was talking about, the song was done in 1987 by a disc jockey named Steve Cook. He worked at WTCM-FM in Traverse City, Michigan. And the song was called The Legend. And in this song, he talks about the legend of the Dogman. He originally did it as, I believe, an April Fool's Day joke, and it became super, super popular. And he based it on the different myths and the legends from all over North America, and he claimed that he had never heard of the actual Dogman when he wrote the song and recorded it. This is a quote from him. "I made it up completely from my own imagination as an April Fool's prank for the radio and stumbled my way to a legend that goes back all the way to Native American times." That's a quote by Steve Cook, the guy that wrote the song. They asked him if he believed that a real Dogman existed, and this is what he said. He said, "I'm tremendously skeptical because I've sort of seen the way folklore becomes built from the creation of this song to what it's turned into. But I do believe people who think they saw something really did see something. I also think the Dogman provides them with an avenue to explain what they couldn't explain for themselves." He claims that he had never heard of the Dogman, that he just made up this creature, and it just so happens that what he describes is an actual thing, I guess is the basic gist of what he's saying. Now there's a legend that's about 100 years old. It's an old Indian legend that is really similar to the Dogman story. A French fur trader had a diary in 1804, and it told of an encounter with something called a loup-garou, which the description of it fits the same description of the Dogman. There was also a letter from 1857 that described a creature that stood upright like a man, yet, and this is a quote, bore the countenance of a gray wolf. There was also a Dogman sighting investigated by Lake County Sheriff's Deputy Jeff Chamberlain, who was accompanied by the Department of Natural Resources Officer Ron McCarty. And they reported the thing for the news, I believe it was called the Cadillac Evening News, was the newscast, and that was actually picked up by the AP, and then that was picked up all over the country. So this thing has had a lot of different stories about it and exposure. It was even on Paul Harvey's National News and Comments broadcast as well. He talked about it a little bit there as well. Now there's a piece of film called the Gable film that is supposedly the first recorded evidence of the Dogman. It was found in a box that somebody had bought from an old estate sale. And after they viewed the footage, they saw that there was an attack on the footage. And the film shows a young boy, which is like filming normal family stuff. And then a truck comes riding by a field. And in that field, there is a creature that you can see. Now the truck stops and they film the creature until it turns and charges at them to attack. And on the film, you can see a little bit of the attack. It doesn't show like the whole thing the way you want to see it, but you can see some of it. And it does show the mouth of the animal. Now when you look at the animal's mouth in that film, it rules out, in my opinion, the two things that they think this thing might be. It doesn't look like the mouth of an ape, because some people say that it looks like Sasquatch. And it doesn't look like the mouth of an ape, and it doesn't really look like the mouth of a dog either. Some people claim that the creature that's in this film is the Dogman. So if it is the Dogman, then I think we're dealing with something different, because it doesn't really look too much like a canine mouth, and it doesn't really look like an ape mouth. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the different encounters. This one is from Big Rapids in 1961. And this one has a picture that comes with it. And the picture is a black and white picture. Keep in mind, this picture's from 1961, so it's not going to have like a tremendous amount of pixels and everything like pictures nowadays do, because the technology is better now. But it's from 1961, and it shows a street at night. And there's 3 lampposts. And at the closest lamppost to the front of the picture, there's a creature standing behind that lamppost. And you can see almost all of the creature. The lamppost is going down the middle of its body, basically. So on either side of the lamppost, there's body, and you can tell that there's something standing behind this lamppost. Now, when you blow this picture up and you actually look at it, it does not look like a Sasquatch standing there, and it does not look like a dog with a man's body, really. It looks like a werewolf. That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like a human-like torso. It looks like the werewolf thing you see in the movies. You know, the big, tall werewolf that walks around at night. That's what it looks like. So that's what the picture looks like. I'm going to try to put the picture in the YouTube video that we do for the show so that you guys can see it yourself. And here's this encounter. And I'm going to read it to you. It's an eyewitness account, so pretty much all of this is going to be one big quote. When I was a boy, my father was the night watchman at a manufacturing plant located in a rural area between Big Rapids and Chippewa Lake, Michigan. Our house, which if I remember right was a perk of the night watchman job, was across the street from the factory. The plant building was right next to a large wilderness area of state land. At that time it was simply known as the Haymarsh, but now it's officially called the Haymarsh State Game Area. We didn't understand it at the time, but Dad was always very skittish about letting us play outside after dark. He would sometimes talk about hearing coyotes or bears roaming around in the Haymarsh when he was walking the perimeter of the building at night. One night in the summer of 1961, Dad walked back to the house to sit on the porch and have a cup of coffee and a sweet roll. He had a good view of the entire plant property. He saw some movement near a chain-link fence behind the building. This was approximately 3 a.m., so he felt quite sure this person wasn't there by accident. He drew his gun and watched for a few minutes. That's when he noticed this was not a person at all, but something much taller. He said it appeared to be covered in brown-gray hair. It had very broad shoulders and a powerful chest. It alternated between walking on 4 legs, then standing up on 2. He said it seemed to be looking for something along the driveway. He said later he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. He quietly moved into the house and grabbed his Kodak Signet 35mm camera, which was his pride and joy. At this point I should mention that Dad was quite a photographer. His father had owned one of the first camera stores in Ohio, and Dad got the shutterbug from Grandpa. As he stepped back onto the front porch, the creature moved slowly along the driveway, directly under the lights. He adjusted the camera shutter for long exposure, held it as still as he could. He said he was shaking pretty bad by then, and snapped a picture. I've enclosed a print of it in this letter. Dad said a few seconds later the thing dropped back down to all 4s and slowly moved off into the woods. That's to the left in this picture. He sent the print to the local newspaper and sent copies to several magazines. One that I think was called Mysterian published the photo in their spring issue of 1962. Dad had a copy of the magazine for years, but it was misplaced after he passed away. I still have the negative strip that contains this image. If you would like to have someone examine it, I also still have Dad's Kodak Signet. I haven't shot any pictures with it for several years, but I'm pretty sure it still works. The next one is from Sparta in 1987. One weekend back in the fall 1987, my 2 best friends and I were staying at my family's cabin, which is not far from the small town of Sparta, about 20 minutes north of Grand Rapids. My 2 friends left to have dinner while I stayed behind at the cabin. Following the dinner, the men headed back towards Sparta in the cabin. What happened next would shock and disturb them for years. It was dark, and they were on a rural road. Suddenly, both of them saw something standing by the side of the road. In the headlights of the car, it appeared to be a human-like figure covered in gray fur. As they got closer and past the figure, both of them got a very good look at it. It was the size of a man, stood on 2 legs. It was covered head to toe in gray fur, and had a wolf-like face. It even raised its hands and seemed to snarl at them as they drove by. They said it looked like a werewolf, but out of a Hollywood movie. My 2 friends didn't dare stop. They continued driving. And of course, they were peppering each other with questions. Did you see that too? Was that a dog? Was that someone dressed up in a costume? And so on. As they were having this animated conversation, they passed by the sign that says "Welcome to Sparta" and drove through the small main street and continued out of town in the direction of my cabin. Their conversation about what had just happened continued. When both of them looked up to see that same "Welcome to Sparta" sign again, followed by the same main street that they had just driven through only moments ago, they hadn't stopped and turned around. They had been traveling in the same direction, on the same road, but somehow, without any noticeable interruption in their journey, they had somehow been sent backwards several miles. Until this point, it would be easy to dismiss this event as someone playing a joke. However, the time displacement characteristic is what sets this encounter apart. While such things are well documented in UFO and alien abduction stories, it's something we've not seen before in the Dogman sighting reports. Andy continues. I remember when they finally showed up at my cabin. They arrived no later than what I expected them to, around 9 p.m. or so, and I remembered how animated they were about their strange encounter. but I just assumed that they had seen a large dog and were telling me an embellished story in order to get a laugh. But 20 years later, both of them still insist that this was no joke. I have no idea what to make of this story. Maybe it was just some teenagers in a werewolf costume playing pranks. And did my friends really experience lost time afterwards, or did they just make some wrong turns on their drive and didn't notice because they were talking and distracted? I have no idea, but I would love to know if anyone else has seen similar things in the Sparta area. Now that one's very interesting because there's an element in that that's I never really see in any of the other Dogman stuff I've read, and that is the idea of lost time. Not really lost time like you would think of it as Alien, because with aliens, like you walk outside on the porch or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's 6 hours later, and you have no idea what happened. Like to you it was a second, but in real time it was 5 or 6 hours. That's what lost time is in the UFO phenomena. But this is a different thing. This is almost like time repeating itself, like they went back in time, so to speak. Because they were driving along, they passed the welcome sign, they went down the main street, they're driving along, and then all of a sudden they're passing the welcome sign again and going back down the main street like they just did it. So to me, that's not really lost time, that's repeating time. But that's a totally different element than I've seen anywhere else in the Dogman stuff. And here in a little bit when Old Boy gets on, we'll find out if he's ever heard of that before with Dogman. I never have. This next one is from Reed City in 1993. The area around Reed City, Michigan has been a hotbed of Dogman activity. This report details an event that occurred nearly 20 years ago, but the witness remembers it like it was yesterday. And it is unshakable, and she is unshakable in her story. Her name is Courtney, and her encounter took place during the winter of 1993-94. Courtney was a teenager at the time and was sneaking cigarettes behind her parents' home near Todd Lake, northeast of Reed City. The sun was setting on a clear, cold winter day. Courtney was facing a large abandoned barn on the property next door. The barn had always kind of spooked me. It was filled with rusty old equipment. The outer planks were all rotten and it sagged and leaned in every direction. My dad said to stay away as the whole thing could collapse. On that evening I was standing about 50 feet from the barn and saw sunlight coming through the gaps in the siding. Courtney took her eyes off the barn for a few minutes, then something caught her attention again. There was some movement. The light flickered, but I couldn't really tell what it was. Then it turned its head back and looked straight at me. It was at least 6 feet tall, if not more. It was dark colored. It had a dog-like appearance, pointy nose, and really big pointy ears. Courtney dashed into her house to grab a flashlight. When she returned outside, she shined it towards the barn door, but the animal was no longer there. She walked closer to the barn to look for tracks in the heavy snow. When she didn't see any, she realized the creature might still be inside, and ran back to the safety of the house. She never saw the creature again. She later talked to a neighbor who had seen something, the size of a buffalo, but the shape of a dog, in the same barn a few months before Courtney's encounter. The neighbor said she had been so frightened that she was near hysterics for days. Her father had taken his gun and searched the barn, but found nothing there. At the time of these events, neither of the girls had heard of the legend song and did not know about the Michigan Dogman legend until years later. The next one is from Watersmeet in 1994, and this report comes from an anonymous contributor who grew up in the area and spent several summers camping on the property in Upper Michigan in the area where the Dogman has been seen. It's in the area of Watersmeet, and it's also the home of the famous Paulding Lights phenomena. And those are also known as the Dog Meadow Lights, which is kind of neat because we're talking about the Dogman. That report goes, I was 13, had just gotten new rollerblades for Christmas, and since the main road where our property sits is paved, I couldn't wait to ride around. I went blading by myself and stopped to rest for a second. On this road, the woods are so thick, there's not much space between the road and the woods in most parts. And I remember seeing trees pushed down on the road that my dad said was done by bears. He was an avid bear hunter. I remember not hearing any of your normal sounds of nature, not even birds. The air was still, and the sky would be pure dark and not too long. I was deciding to turn back when I heard a rustling behind me, and something emerged from the left side of the road. I assumed it was a deer, and paused and made myself as quiet as I could, so I could watch it, and slumped down on my stomach in the middle of the road. It was about 600 feet ahead of me. When I got myself settled in the road to watch it and looked up, I realized what I was looking at wasn't a deer. It was on all fours with gray-brown fur. At first, I feared the worst, thinking a bear had caught my scent until I saw its outline and color. I thought I was looking at a dog until I realized the face was too primitive, like a fox or a coyote's. At this point in my life, I had never seen a wolf in real life, and it was too far for me to make out the face exactly. The Michigan Department of Natural Resources has always recognized that wild wolves still roam in the Upper Peninsula. They say that they're in very limited numbers, and they're only in extremely remote areas. Now, this person might have seen a wolf. That might be what they were looking at. But something very strange happened. And I'm going to go back to the quote again. It extended its front legs, and in the slowest, longest seconds of my life, stood up on its hind legs, sniffed the air, walked for about 5 steps, then got back down on all fours and walked to the other side of the woods, and then disappeared. I don't remember how long I laid in the middle of the road, staring in the empty space. I saw this thing stand like a human. I remember my jaw hanging down as low as it could, and a pool of drool on the cement under it. It finally clicked in my mind that perhaps I should rollerblade my butt back to camp as quick as I could. Now, the witness reports that the creature never stalked her, it never pursued her, it never came back. She slept very little during the rest of that camping trip, and supposedly she never told anybody about what she had seen because she thought that they'd make fun of her. This is another one that says at the time of the sighting she had never heard of the legend song and wouldn't hear about it until years later. Now this one's kind of interesting because it almost sounds like a regular wolf at first. The only real idea that you get that this wouldn't be a normal wolf is when it stood up on its hind legs and sniffed the air. But then it goes back down to all 4 legs to walk away. It doesn't run away on 2 legs. So what this might have been is just a wolf, plain and simple, that was standing up on 2 legs to sniff the air. I don't know if that's something they normally do. It seems like something they probably could do. I mean, there are animals that will do that. Bears do that. You know, if you walk up and spook a bear, as long as you're not super close, if you're a little bit further away but it hears you, it'll stand up on its hind legs and look around and sniff and then go back down on all 4 and run away. So that's not unheard of in the animal kingdom. And it's very possible that what this girl had seen was simply a normal wolf. Now there's a few more of these things, but I'm not going to read them all. Basically what this is a compilation of evidence that was shared around in the Dogman community, because there's a lot of people that believe in the Dogman, and they share evidence back and forth and stuff. And those were a couple of the eyewitness accounts that somebody had shared with me that I wanted to read. Now, as far as what the Dogman is, some people say Sasquatch, some people say it's a totally different creature that's part dog, part man. Some people say werewolf, and some people say it doesn't exist. I think those are the 4 main options here. I mean, you might have some other weird offshoots, you know, but I think those are the main 4. Sasquatch? No, I don't believe it's a Sasquatch. Simply because it doesn't look like a Sasquatch to me. If that picture that I saw was real from 1961, then that definitely does not look like a Sasquatch. And all the eyewitness accounts of it, to me, they don't sound like a Sasquatch at all. What they sound like brings me to number 2, which is a werewolf. And I think it's very likely that it might be a werewolf, if the creature exists. Because it just fits. I mean, it fits perfectly. The third one is that it is some completely separate creature that is part man, part dog. On its face, that sounds kind of ludicrous. But it's not impossible. The reason I say that is because there's a thing called a human-animal chimera, which is a real thing that's created by the government. Our government does it, and Russia does it. I'm sure other countries do it as well, but the only 2 that I really know about for sure are Russia and the United States. What that is basically is biological testing. It's cloning and gene therapy all mixed together to create a new creature. They take part man, they take the genes of a wolf, they take, you know, genes from this thing and genes from that thing, and they mix them all together and they create a new creature. Now that sounds like science fiction, but there are actual government documents that are declassified now that prove that this is actually being done by our government and by Russia's government. I can only assume that what they're trying to produce here is some sort of weapon, I would imagine, because The amount of money and the amount of research and resources that it would take to do this for real has to be astronomical. Usually, the only way the government will spend that kind of cash is if it's on a weapon. And of course, anything that we do, Russia's going to try to do as well. Because if we get an advantage, they're going to want the advantage as well. So I don't know if we started working on this first and then they did, or if they started working on it first and then we said, oh hell, they're doing this, we better do it. I don't exactly know how that happened, but I know that there are documents that say that we are both doing it. So that's a possibility, if this thing exists, that maybe it's something like that. Maybe it is some sort of creature, a genetically engineered creature that was made in a lab by the government for the purpose of being a weapon of some sort, or whatever other purpose they might have had for it, but that's the most likely purpose, and somehow escaped. That would fit that possibility. So I think that's the best example of one of the ways that it could be a completely different creature. And then the last possibility is that it doesn't exist, that it's just a made-up story. I mean, the guy that wrote the song The Legend said he made it up, but there were actual legends and lore from way before he was ever even thought of that describe a creature that's like that. But it wasn't called the Dogman in those old legends, but it matches that description. But if this thing's a werewolf, which I tend to think that it probably is, then hell, there's lore of werewolves going back thousands of years. I think those are the major possibilities. Does it exist? I don't know. I mean, I think werewolves probably exist in some form, so if that's what this thing is, then I would say possibly, yeah. But then again, it might not. I don't know on this one, guys. There's not enough really, really good actual forensic evidence for me to make a determination on this. This has only gotten popular in the last decade or 2 decades. I mean, it hasn't been that long since this has become a very popular legend. People are really, really into the Dogman now. They're examining it a lot. But there's just not a whole bunch of evidence to look at yet. There's a whole bunch of stories, like the ones I've read you, but there's no way to know unless you can interview the people and they can take you to the place where they saw it and you can look around and all that. There's no way to know whether this is something that actually happened or if it's simply a story they were telling. There's just simply no way to know that for sure. As far as I know, there's not a whole bunch of hard evidence to look at as far as hair samples, a whole lot of footprints like there's with Sasquatch, a bunch of different pictures, a bunch of different film. I mean, you have some, but once again, like with the stories, there's no way to know whether what you're looking at is real evidence or whether it's not, because in the majority of the time, the pictures are kind of blurry and out of focus, or they just catch a little bit of something in the bushes and you can't really tell what it is. Now, I'm not discounting it. I'm not saying that means that those photographs are fake or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's hard to make any kind of positive identification or figure out what this thing is by a lot of the evidence that they have on it now. So I think this one I'm going to say possible, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's still a newer pursuit for researchers. Not a lot of people have done a ton of research on this. There are some that are very good and that have a good amount of information, a lot more information than me. But I'm talking about when you have a creature that's hundreds and hundreds of years old that people have been studying for that long, there's a much larger amount of evidence to look at. There's a lot more documentation. There's a lot more that can help you make that decision. With the Dogman, there's just not a whole bunch yet. So I'm going to say possible, and I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and get his opinion on it and what he thinks it might be and whether he thinks it exists. And also, I'd like to know, Old Boy, if you've ever heard of what happened to that one witness where they kind of repeated time. It was almost like a Groundhog Day incident, where they're riding down the road, they saw the sign, they saw the main street, they went through it, and the next thing they know, they're back at the welcome sign again. To me, that's just very strange. Now, if it's a made-up story, then it doesn't matter because it's not real. But if it actually happened to those people, that's really interesting, and I never heard that in Dogman before. Let me know if you've heard about that as well. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy now.
Actually, that's the first time I've actually heard of that. That's a really weird story because it sounds like he escaped time for hours and went back to the same thing. That's kind of like reoccurring Like he disappeared and came back to the same area where he was at. I've never heard anything like that. That kind of sounds like that's something different. But that I've never heard any stories from the Dogman like that. Like he was saying, we had a guy named Chris Edge on, and he's really into this Dogman thing, and that's how we first heard about it a while ago. I've heard a little bit of stories here, that in the Bay Road Beast in Wisconsin, but that's another story down the line. And I've heard a lot of stories about this thing. It has different color eyes, like James was saying, blue or amber, and even black and gray. The thing's around 6 to 7.5 feet tall, weighing in about 400 to 600 pounds. And it walks on both feet, and it could be on all fours. It's about 2 to 3 feet, 3.5 feet tall, even almost 4, they're saying. This story is really intriguing me because I believe it. I believe there's something, because it's not just in Michigan where they see it. It even goes to the northern parts of Illinois on the border. I've heard a lot about this creature the last year, and it's getting a lot of very, very popular. I'm in a lot of groups called Dogman. There's even one international. There's supposedly Dogman other places like in Europe, and then there's some in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Minnesota, and even Wisconsin. So there's not just Michigan, but there's other stories. I read a story like James actually I heard it, and it was about this guy. He said his uncle and his dad used to go hunting on the higher peninsula, but it was by these lakes. And little lakes, and they had like a little bit of land. And they would go hunting. But he said his dad drank some too on these little hunting trips. It was like their little man thing. They would go out and drink. He said that they were walking and they saw something like a dog following them. And they didn't really pay much attention to it. So they kept walking. And they started getting into the water because they had to swim to the other side of the it was like this little island. So they had to swim there. They said this thing started coming after him. At first it was just paddling. Then it was going off after him. And like he said, a big-chested creature. And this thing's got a real muscular body, like a human body, but it looks like a werewolf. He said it, and then they got away and went home. And he thought they were just story to scare him from going over there, because you can go camp over there and fish and hunt. The guy, what he would do is he was young, he got older, teenager, so he didn't listen to them. So he went out there with a couple of his friends and he would try to scare people. I guess he was going to go scare out these girls him and his friend were trying to impress, and they went out there to that peninsula, and it had like little lakes, and it had a little bit of land in the middle of it. Well, he went into I guess it was like, I don't know what they call that little bit forest area. And he said he was going to scare them, and he decided not to. But then he heard something, and he went into the field where the lakes were by, and he saw something, and he ran. And his friend thought he was playing. He goes, "No, let's go!" And they hurried up and left, because he said he saw something over 7 feet tall that looked like a Hollywood, like James said earlier, a Hollywood horror movie, with blue eyes, with a giant chest like a man, has big claws, as a werewolf. I believe it anyway. But with these werewolves, they also cry like a scream, like a human, but more vicious. And there's a video in Michigan that I saw. It was just a couple months ago, where you could hear something. It was the middle of the day, this god-awful roar and howl. And you could hear it. It's just, I never heard anything like it before. It sounded like there was a herd of them, like 6 or 7 of them. And it's like the middle of the day, you could hear them screaming their heads off. And it was like a horror movie. Like you'd see like American Werewolf in London. It sounded like that. And what I've seen from like the Gillespie films, like I saw that. But see, there's somebody who came out and said that he made that up. And that he made the film up with the 8mm camera he got at a yard sale in the 70s, and it was fake. Because I saw that on Monster Quest about this a couple years ago, about this film that James is talking about, and somebody said it was fake. But if you look at the video back in the 70s, it was very hard to, unless you had a lot of money, to do what they did. I've seen this creature, I've seen this video numerous times. I don't know if it's real or not. It could be fake, because like I said, the kid gets killed, or I don't know, the kid gets it, but then they said the kid was still alive and he made it up. So you never know. with that. But it was really interesting because it didn't look like a wolf, but it had a big giant body and it ran at you, but it was really quick. But what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing, that this thing looks like a werewolf. So that would make no sense to that film that I've seen. And these creatures are walking on all fours. They can, but most of the time they walk on two legs and they're huge. You know what a man looks like at 7 feet tall? It weighs 400 or 500 pounds. You would know that's a man. You could tell that would be a man, and that because that's very rare. So you see something that looks like a wolf at 7 feet tall. It's very hard to fake that. Like I said, there's over 5 to 1,000 sightings of this thing, and it's only in a certain odd numbers, like every 10-year cycles, because this has only been going on since 1887 is the first reported account. Even they said stuff in the 1700s with the Indians there to the early 1800s. So this is frequently new. This only been over 40 years, 50, yeah, maybe. That I've only been hearing it for a couple years, so it's fairly new to me, and it's very popular because like I said, there's a lot of groups and a lot of people who seem like they're very interested in this subject, in this creature. And I believe, like James has said, it's not a Bigfoot, it's not a pack of wolves, and just some more freakish animal that is a big wolf. Because wolves are big. People don't realize wolves can stand higher than a human when they stand on 2 feet. But this creature, to me, seems like he was saying it could be possibly a hybrid made by the military, because we all know how the government works, and they could be doing this as a weapon. I don't know if it's a weapon. I think it might be for testing genetics. You know how they like to test things. We all know how that goes. Or it is a werewolf. And there's been legends of werewolves for thousands of years. And that could be a possibility because there's sightings in Michigan everywhere, and even parts of Illinois and other states. And then there goes even the Bray Road beast, and that's in Wisconsin right next, but it's a little bit different of a creature. But there's sightings everywhere around that area. There's just weird, Bigfoot even gets sighted in those areas. So there's all kinds of things that happen around there. So what I think this is it's a werewolf, or it's something the military has been messing around with. Have you ever seen that movie Dog Soldiers? And I think it's in New Zealand. It's about these werewolves the government were testing, and then they ended up going crazy and killing people. So they sent special forces. Well, they killed almost but one special forces guy, and they sent another group in there to do training exercises so they could see what the werewolves would do. And they ended up fighting these werewolves, and they were 7-8 feet tall, but exactly like James said, with the long legs and long fingers. It looked like a Hollywood movie. So this is really weird of how this creature looks, because most of the sightings say he looks like a werewolf you would have in a horror movie. I think this is a werewolf. I believe that, yeah, there's always lies and people making up things, and people just like folklore, like that guy made the song up, I believe that, but I believe this stuff is too many sightings. And it's just really weird because the whole thing of 7 to 10 years and it has to be an odd number, that's really weird, because then that makes it seem like maybe this is a human, like the horror movies, even as crazy as it sounds, that there might be a group of people that are cursed. I don't know. That's all I could say about that. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, that's kind of weird how it only comes in circles of 7 to 10 years, and it's only on odd numbers. That's really weird. That's a weird thing I was going to talk about anything. What do you think about that one, James?
For me, that is a strange thing, and I don't exactly know what that could mean. It could be several different things. It could be some sort of curse, like you were saying, that only occurs every decade. It could also be some sort of ritual that is only done during a certain astronomical thing that happens, and maybe that thing only takes place every 10 years. Because with a lot of the rituals and stuff from the occult, they have to do with different phases of the moon or different astrological signs that have to be in place for the ritual to work. You know all about that, old boy. And maybe it's something along those lines, to where maybe there's a group of witches or pagans or something like that that are calling this thing every 10 years, and it appears. Maybe it's something like that. It's very strange that it only comes every 10 years. Or if all of this is just made up anyway, most of it, then maybe that's just something that was added for that Hollywood effect, to where, like the Jeepers Creepers thing, oh, he only comes every 20-some years or whatever. Maybe it's something like that. Or maybe if it is a actual creature, then maybe that's its natural lifespan. Maybe it's like a cicada almost, where it'll bury itself in the ground, and it's in the ground as an egg or whatever, and then it hatches and then grows, and then it finally comes out, mates, and dies. Mates, lays its eggs, and then dies, and then it all repeats. Maybe it's something along those lines. Not really mates and lays eggs, but maybe it reproduces somehow and hides away the kids, and it takes a decade for the kids to get full size, and then they come out to feed, mate, and then hide the kids again. Maybe it's something along those lines. That would kind of explain every decade. Maybe that's how long it takes a dog man to grow up, to be an adult. That's a possibility, maybe. This is all just speculation. But it's very, very interesting that you have that aspect of it. I tend to think that maybe it's something along those lines. Another question I have is, everybody describes this thing as looking like a werewolf, right? And my judgment on it is that if it's real, it's a werewolf. I believe yours as well, old boy. So my question would be, if everybody thinks this thing looks like a werewolf, then why is it not just a werewolf? Why are people not saying, man, there's this werewolf running around in Michigan. I saw this werewolf. Why is it I saw the Dogman? Why is it called the Dogman instead of just a werewolf sighting? Because to me, it seems like that's exactly what this thing is a werewolf. And if that's what it is, and everybody agrees, then I don't understand why we're calling it the Dogman, like it's a separate kind of creature. To me, that's kind of strange. Is it just because of the goofy song that was written by some nobody DJ? Is that why everybody considers this a separate creature? Because even if you look back at the historical accounts of it, the descriptions of this thing could also match a werewolf. So they could very well be early werewolf sightings as well, instead of Dogman sightings. So to me, that's another interesting aspect of this that doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me, is why aren't we just calling it a werewolf? Why is not everybody agreed that this is just a werewolf? But yet they all call it the Dogman. So if it's called the Dogman, then they must view it as a separate creature. Old boy, what do you think about that? And do they touch on that in any of the Dogman groups?
You know what? I don't know. And I think it's just a nickname. I've heard people say it's a werewolf. I've heard people say, but the whole Dogman thing, I don't know how that became, how they all think it's like a Dogman, because some people said it has a body of a man with the upper torso. And so I think that might be why they call it a Dogman. It's really weird, because some people think it's a hybrid of a man and a wolf. So that might be why they call it a Dogman. It might be the whole nickname thing, because if you think about it, like you were saying, if it is a hybrid or it is a human, that they only come out every 10 years, I don't think I just think maybe if it is like that with the witches or whatever, it's a group of people. That kind of sounds like the Howling movie. That's kind of weird, but you say that, but this thing only comes out a certain time. I don't know much about that part of it, like why they call him the Dogman, because some people think it is like it's a man and a dog. I think I don't know for sure. That's what I've been told, but there is people who say it's a werewolf, and but I don't understand that either. Because it seems to me like this thing is a werewolf. But back to what you were saying with the whole witch thing, it could be a cult of people, you know, and they raise these things out and they come running around for I think it's 2 years, and then they go away for 10 or 8, whatever, 7 years or whatever. I don't know. That's just a theory, but I think it might be just a werewolf, and that could be just a coincidence. You never know. That doesn't mean it's necessarily true. That's just what people think. So it could be just a coincidence, and it could be just this creature that runs around, because they've been seeing it since the 1800s. So, I mean, even early by the Indians. So it could be anything, bro. It could be just there, and it just comes out a certain time. Maybe it only comes out to mate every 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. It comes back or something. I don't know. It could be that's this way how it lives. You know, I don't know much about it. I only know a little bit. So that's all I could say.
Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do here. If you are watching this video right now on YouTube, and you are one of those people that are really into the Dogman, and you have a great amount of knowledge on the Dogman, and you can answer some of these questions that we've asked on this show, then in the comment section below, put your answers. If you know more about the Dogman than we know, and you can answer these questions, then explain it down in the comment section. I would really, honestly, guys, I would love to read that and see. Because this is one of those things that we got interested in because of our buddy Chris, that we did the show with, Chris Edge. And he's big into the Dogman. And we speculated some on that show, and he was explaining some of it to us. And we've done a little bit of research since then, but we are not Dogman experts. But I thought it was an interesting thing, and I wanted to do a show on it and share it. But if you guys, and I'm telling the audience on ParaX and around the world that there are people out there that are experts in the Dogman that know so much more. So if you're one of those people and you're listening, then leave a comment down below and tell us all about it. And maybe we'll have you on the show on a future episode, and you can explain to the audience about the Dogman and do it more justice than we have, maybe. If you're listening on ParaX on the radio or any of the other affiliates that carry us, then, and you have that information, then go to the YouTube page and leave a comment down below. Or hit us up on Facebook or something like that, and let us know about it. You know, because we're always looking for information. We're always looking for the truth on this show. And I've said before many times that there's really no such thing as a real expert in pretty much anything in the paranormal. And I believe that to be true. There are people that have a lot of knowledge that we call experts, but there's always room to learn more, and I always love to learn. So if you have that knowledge, leave it in the comments section. If you're listening on the radio anywhere in the world, send us a message, because we'd love to learn more about it. And if you're one of those people that know a ton about it, then maybe we'll have you on the show sometime. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to throw over to Old Boy to do his shout-outs.
And thank you, brother. Yeah, this has been a really interesting show. I really enjoyed it, because this is something I really don't know a whole lot about. Neither does James. Like we said, we're not experts. Yeah, if you guys could ever, leave us some comments, let us know what you think. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to everybody who's listening on ParaX, all our fans, all the new countries listening. You guys want to listen to any of our old shows, go on James Hershey Jr.'s YouTube page and subscribe. You guys also were looking for sponsors for the show, or promoting, or you want to do promotions, we could do that too. So if you guys ever want to know, let us know. You could either write me or James Hershey on Facebook. James Ash, Old Boy. I want to thank you. I hope everybody had a great Christmas. Happy New Year's. I want to tell my daughter I love you, and my family too. That's about it. And good night. Have a great night.
The Dogman is one of those legends and one of those stories that people are very, very passionate about. Our first experience with the Dogman was through our friend Chris Edge, who also does radio shows. And he is a very, very passionate Dogman researcher. And he had talked to us about Dogman a couple times. He had us on his show as guests where he was talking about the Dogman and asking us about it. And it was quite clear that he had more knowledge than we did on the subject. So we decided to have him as a guest on our show. So we did that episode. And if you want to listen to that episode, it is on the YouTube channel. But I warn you, if you are a small child or whatever, that episode is not censored like these episodes are, because at that time we were not regulated by the FCC. We weren't on the radio around the world. We were just doing a radio show that was on the internet that was no holds barred. So it does have a little bit of foul language in it. It's not too terrible, but it does have a little bit. So keep that in mind when you listen. It's not your staring into the abyss show that you're used to listening to. It's a little bit different. It's not, filthy. It's not Howard Stern, but it's uncensored. It was a very interesting show, and I thought it went well, and we talked about a bunch of different cool things, and it was a fun show to do. And I really learned how passionate the Dogman community is by the comment section of that video, because people were angry. Some people were happy, some people were angry, but they got to arguing with each other in the comment section. And at that point, I had never seen that before. Not on one of my videos, at least. Not on one of my shows, where people were arguing back and forth, and it was like it no longer even mattered that we were doing the show or that we were on the show or anything like that. They were just arguing with each other at that point. They were just going back and forth. And I guess passionate is a nice way to say it, I guess. But they have a lot of passion and a lot of zeal for this subject matter. The good thing is a lot of them have knowledge as well, which is always a good thing. So I was very serious about my offer earlier about leaving the comments so we can, if you have more information, we can read over it. And believe me, if somebody has a massive amount of information and really knows their stuff on the Dogman, we will absolutely have them on as a guest, and we'll do another Dogman show. And they can share it with the entire world. To me, this is one of those shows that interested me. It's not one that I have every single answer to. I have done some research, but a little bit of research cannot take the place of years of studying a subject. And that's what some of these Dogman researchers have, is years and years and years on this. And I simply don't. I haven't been studying this my whole life. I've been studying it for a month or two to get ready for this show, basically. And it was interesting to me, so I wanted to do a show on it. But there may, in the future, be another Dogman show with more information. If I find more information on my own, or if we hook up with one of these people. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I thought it was kind of fun. I want to mention the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/James Hershey Jr. We set up some reward tiers there to where you can go on and support the show. For the different levels of the reward tiers, there's different, I don't know what you'd call them, rewards, I guess. That's a reward tier, right? Different rewards. On any of the tiers, you will be able to participate in polls. And what the polls are going to be on the Patreon, I don't have any up yet because we just started the Patreon page. But once we get some people that are actually pledging to the show and that are Patreons, then I will start putting polls up there. And what the polls are going to be are possible future shows. And you will have the opportunity, if you are one of our Patreons, to vote on which show you would like to see or hear. And whichever subject matter gets the most votes is what we'll do a show on. We're going to do that, and we're going to do some other polls and stuff on there as well. And there's going to be, like, for different reward tiers, there's, shout outs on air and all kinds of stuff. So go there, check it out, see what you think. If you guys, want to become a Patreon and support, that's great. We appreciate it greatly. If you don't, that's fine. You can still listen to the show on the radio like you're doing now, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can still do that. It'll always be 100% free. It's not going to cost you a penny. So if you just want to do it that way, that's totally cool too. Because I'll never charge you anything for the YouTube channel. I'm not going to make it to where you have to pay for the videos or any of that nonsense. So enjoy it, because that's why it's there. The YouTube page, like Old Boy said, is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. Please like the videos, subscribe to the channel, check out the other stuff. There's tons of stuff on there, guys. It's all the old Staring Into the Abyss shows. It's a bunch of different side videos that we've made about the shows and about the subject matters. It's other videos in the paranormal and in history and stuff that we thought were interesting subjects that we talk about. It's a very cool channel. I hope you guys enjoy it. With that, we are just about out of time. So thank you guys again for listening. We love you very, very much. And until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. We love you. Bye-bye.